Welcome to the Back on Track podcast with me, Sam West. My mission is to inspire, helping you to get through the tough times and live a better, more fulfilling life. On the show, I speak to inspirational people who've come back from rock bottom and also experts that provide you with the tools you need to implement positive changes in your life. On today's episode is reformed armed robber Tam Carrigan, who's come on today to share his inspirational and incredible story of change. I hope you enjoy the episode. Don't forget to hit subscribe. And here's a little clip of what's coming up next.
And he knew because he'd worked in the bank as a cleaner.
Right.
There was a minimum of about £3 million in this bank. And the way that we were going to do it was we had the keys to the bank. We were going to hide inside a false wall that was already created there, come out, tie all the staff up, empty the vault and leave without harming anybody. You know, flying around with the French army from one site to the next, photographing, being in this new adventure, you know. So I went from robbing a dispersal bank scenario into another movie. And I thought, well, we need to fly into the sunset with a big bag of money somewhere. So we better get cracking. So we started robbing everything that we could manage, you know. So we were robbing post offices and banks and ram raiding gun shops. The look of absolute terror on their face when you come through that door with a big mask and all this kit on and a big shotgun, yeah, or a handgun, it doesn't matter. You're inflicting pain on that person. You're inflicting trauma on that person. That's where the wake up has to come. That's where you really have to think, what the fuck am I doing? But there's always somewhere along your journey that you can turn off, that you can change.
So, Tam, first of all, I just want to say a massive thank you for taking the time to come on the podcast. I really appreciate it. How are you doing? How's everything going?
Really well, Sam, and thanks for the invite as well. And yeah, it's going good. You know, at least I've got a job.
Exactly.
I've got wonderful children.
Yeah.
And a great partner who's also my boss. And yeah, so the future's bright.
Awesome. Yeah, I can imagine that dynamic could be challenging at times with your partner being your boss, but I guess most of the time it works out well.
All angles keeps me on my toes.
Exactly. Yeah. Tam, when I first got in touch with you towards the start of the year about coming on the podcast, you were quite clear that sort of you wanted sharing your story to have some kind of positive purpose and not sort of, you know, dwell on parts of some of your criminal past and not glorify that in some way. And yeah, I'm just wondering if you could talk to us about why you decided to come on and share your story and sort of how you wanted the episode to be, really.
Yeah, I think the work that I do now, working in Tottenham, brings me into contact with a lot of younger men who most definitely remind me of myself as a teenager, you know, and and I can see them very often going off the road, you know, or off the tracks. I've been working with children now since 2008, and I can see very often that they're on a road that is going to lead them into trouble, you know, most definitely criminal and with the law. What I would like to do is that when I do come into contact with them, is try and give them some heads up, because young people who very often are on that road, they're not going to listen to an older man.
Yeah,
you're just an old has-been. You know, no matter what you've done, they ain't listening to you. But I've got some contact because they come to the centre where I work. Whatever influence I can give or lay some seeds of thought for them in the future, something that just might save them and other people, then I think that's one of the aspects of my job right now that I'm really enjoying.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there are so many aspects of your story that people can learn a lot from. We've got so much to get through within this interview, but we're going to do our best. And Tam, I normally rewind back to the start of a guest story so that listeners can really sort of understand it from start to finish. And I think I'm right in saying you grew up in Springburn in Scotland, of course. And one thing that sort of struck me is I think that aspect of criminality was sort of normalized from a young age, with your father being involved in some bits and sort of friends and other people around you. And I'm just wondering if you could tell us sort of what life was like growing up for you there, and if you think sort of with the surroundings that you had, you were kind of always destined to go down that route.
Yeah. So I think from an early age, I became aware that that my father had been involved with crime at some point because he was in prison. And one of the earliest memories that I have growing up in Springburn was going to visit him in prison.
Right.
Where as a youngster, was quite intimidating. You know, even though my mum was saying, look, he's not in prison, he's in a hospital for infectious diseases. So when we go and see him, you won't actually have contact with him. What's going to happen is he'll be behind the screen, so you don't get this disease. And it's like,
your mum did well there inventing that story.
I think a lot of mums done well carrying the families like that, you know. But very quickly I found that when I played on the streets with my mates, a lot of our fathers were in this hospital for infectious diseases. I mean, for us, it was like, because we could read and write from an early age and suss things out. You know, he's in jail, mum. You know, he's not in a hospital. It says HMP Berlin prison. That's what it says on the sign going in. But I think from my earliest memories going to visit him was quite intimidating in the early days, because, you know, growing up, you don't feel from an early as a young child that you are a part of any criminal activities that might tag your family as being outlaws. You know what I mean? Yeah. But after a few times going to visit my dad, that sense of intimidation, of going through the process of waiting outside, going in to see him, you realize that he's in jail for something. No one ever told you. I was never told why my dad was there. He was just there, and met other lads on the street whose fathers were in prison as well, and we kind of bonded over this. Right. You know? So there was an unspoken, you know, your dad's like my dad, and so we're like each other. You know, and so the things that we might want to do, because most kids want to impress their dads, you know, and for me, I was always sitting at my dad's knee listening to stories. You know, he wasn't always telling me the story; he was telling other people like him or his mates what happened in these places, and I was just, you know, recording all this in my own head. But the environment that we grew up in was quite free. If you know what I mean. You were sent out as a child to play in the streets, and then that was it. You were out the whole day and the best part of an evening, you know. And we traveled everywhere, you know. So we would just wander everywhere, you know. There wasn't an area, even though they were locked off with high metal fences, barbed wire. That was the places that we ended up playing in, you know. Places that were quite lethally dangerous, you know, like the railway sidings. We would cross the railways to rob explosives from the diesel trains and then make our own little bombs and things like that. And a few of us got injured in our experimental explosive play.
It's quite a powerful picture there that you mentioned about sort of bonding with other kids in the area. About the fact that, you know, all of your dads were in prison, you know, and then, you know, wanting to impress them, hearing the stories, you can imagine how sort of small aspects of criminality started. And Tam, I guess another key aspect of your story, I think, is that I think I'm right in saying you went into care with your two brothers at the age of 13. And I'm wondering if you could tell us about how that was, because I guess that must have been difficult, and what effect, if any, that may have had on you.
Oh, yeah. I mean, for me, so it was over time, with my father being absent, and my mum had 6 children, 3 boys and 3 girls. And the boys, we were just a handful. We just constantly played truant. I think the social services intervened earlier with my 2 younger brothers, and then later on with myself. So I was 13 when I was taken away into care. And instantly, you know, already there was a culture on our streets of kids who were already in care, but they're on the run. And we lived in lock-up garages. Those people were living in lock-up garages or sleeping in the trains, or they were just on the road. And, and how they survived was stealing money. They'd be living with other friends whose families didn't mind that they slept over a couple of nights, so they sort of aided and abetted us, But I went into care. I think there was a sort of awakening in me that I'm on my own. Even though I had a loving family, there was that sense that, the authorities had now removed me not only from my family, but from my whole culture, my whole sort of network, and placed me into this establishment with a whole bunch of guys who were just like me, And it's like, so we learned from each other, We fought with each other because we were, from different areas. And but eventually you make friends with people, and then you make the plan to get going as quick as possible. So we didn't last that long in some of the places that we went into. I think several times they tried to put me in different places. I never even got to the door. I was gone. My young brothers were always on the run, and we'd meet on the street, and we'd be either sleeping in train yards or somebody's lockup in a car that was sort of locked in there, and we made our life on the road, pickpocketing, shoplifting, stealing things out of shops so that we can sell it around the doors. There was a culture in Springburn, you could buy anything. You could literally buy anything. People would knock on your door at night time and it would be somebody with something to sell. Right. I mean, from food to clothes to electrical equipment, anything. And they would ask you, is there anything that you might need? We'll go and get it for you. Yeah. And it's quite common, even though there was, Springburn wasn't totally lawless, but there was a definite character about where I grew up that was anti-authoritarian. Right. And it was kind of, it was quite, it kind of embodied the spirit that I think a lot of people think about Glaswegians. There was a lot of alcoholism, a lot of violence, and eventually a drug pandemic, right. Or epidemic rather than a pandemic, an epidemic of drugs. Yeah. So as a young man, at 13-year-old, I watched how my culture went from, like a society of drinking into a society of drug taking, and then heavy drug taking with the heroin.
Yeah, so you had these like societal changes happening around you.
Yeah.
And also, when you were mentioning about when you went into care there, because obviously, you don't have those parental figures around, you don't have a set home place. So then you obviously create a sort of band of brothers, if you like, with the people that are there. And then you get involved in all of those behaviors that you mentioned. And Tam, another thing that hit me quite hard when I was sort of researching your story and chatting to you before is just how young so much of this stuff happened. Yeah. Obviously going into care at 13, I think you were stabbed for the first time at 15, you were slashed across your face at 16. And then finally you ended up in Borstal, which I think is like a youth prison or something along those lines. I'll let you explain that properly in a second. But yeah, if you could talk to us about what you ended up doing to end up in Borstal and how long you spent there and how that was.
Yeah. So from the age of 13 going into care, 14 and 15 up to 16 was quite an unsettled time for me, and also for my family. So my dad had split up from my mum, although we were still seeing him, and he had met someone else and was trying to bring his life back together. And we were at the periphery of that. And then, but we were still in care, So the three boys were all in care. And throughout our teenage, we were constantly being either chased by the police, recaptured, put back into care, and then escaping again. And so there was, and in between that, we were just constantly committing crime. So we'd be shoplifting, stealing money, breaking into places, commercial places, either shops or factories, and and then stealing cars. Eventually, a lot of my troubles came from, I was a part of a little car outfit. We just stole every kind of car under the sun, mostly for fun, and then eventually for pay.
Yeah.
You know, we would meet the people who were like, can you get us these wheels? Can you get us this radio? Can you get us these parts of cars? And so we would steal cars and strip them down and then sell them. But that took me into being arrested and then getting a name for myself.
Yeah.
One amongst the group, you know, my own peers, but most definitely amongst the police, the local police. And they at the time, there wasn't this sense, you know, I mean, we live in a world now, kind of PC a little bit, you know.
Of course. Yeah.
Not back in those days. When you get gripped up by the police, they leathered you. You got leathered and you just, you know, you would rail against that. You would just think, watch me next, you know. So the next cars that we saw, we used to take car chases from the police. We would go and wind the police up in front of them so we could get chased. And it's incredible that we never killed anybody or ourselves in that period.
Right.
But over time, being arrested for breaking into places and stealing cars, I ended up in Boston. Boston training in those days was a 2-year period where you would end up either locked away for 24 months.
Right.
From anywhere. Once you're sentenced to Boston, you can have an easier time and get out in 9 months if you comply with everything, or you can have a really hard time and you can extend it into two years.
And so did you make it easy for yourself and do the 9-month version, or did it last a bit longer than that?
I made it easy for myself. I think I got out in 10 months.
Right. Okay.
But I was on remand for a couple of months as well.
Yeah.
And I'd had enough.
Yeah.
I thought, fuck this.
Yeah.
This is not for me. I need to get out. But during that time was a real wake up call for me, Sam.
Yeah. Yeah.
Being locked away, I was 17. I was at the tail end of being 17. So my whole 18th year, I was locked up. And during that time, heroin really took a hold of Glasgow and the neighbourhood that I'm from in Springburn. And where we had areas that used to be kind of run by gangs, or when I say run by gangs, is that as a young man, you couldn't just walk into areas and just breeze through them, you know, like you were some sort of visitor. People would chase you. They'd chase you down and try and stab you. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And or try and fight with you. And it always included a knife of some kind. Do you know what I mean? But when I got out of Boston, that seemed to have sort of moved in importance to who was selling the heroin. You know, what little outfits were selling heroin, and it was who was making money. And the conflict wasn't about who was moving into an area. People didn't care as long as you weren't selling heroin in their area. Because if you were trying to move into people's territory, then they were going to come for you. Yeah. You know, and so I saw friends fighting with each other over selling heroin, stealing each other's heroin, their stashes. You know, families, torn apart by the heroin trade. And
yes.
Even though there was so much money being made, you know, the devastation on my community at the time was horrendous. Was really horrendous.
Yeah, there's a lot of money to be made, but it's an incredibly toxic and dangerous world.
Yeah,
and obviously you documented well there the damage that it was doing. And I guess it was around this time that you decided that you needed to take yourself sort of out of this environment. And one thing that stuck with me when we spoke before was that at this kind of age, you knew that carrying on doing what you were doing was either going to end up with you dead or serving a life sentence. And so one thing that you tried to do, you effectively sort of begged the military to take you into the army because, you know, you saw that as a way out at the age of 18 or 19 or whatever it was. And then obviously you couldn't get into the army for whatever reason. They wouldn't have you, but then you decided to go and join the French Foreign Legion abroad. So that just shows there was a real level of desperation there, and also a real realization at quite a young age that you had to change your circumstances. So I'm wondering if you could talk to us about sort of that realization and why you ended up going to join the French Foreign Legion.
Well, I think coming out of Boston for me was I didn't really feel like I fitted back in straight away. It was like, so I've been released from almost a year away. And suddenly I'm thinking, I've got a choice now. I can either just go straight back at it with my mates who were all stealing cars, all selling heroin, involved in some of the violence, and the cat and mouse with the police. It wasn't just like the car theft squad was after you. It was like the drug squad was after you. And I thought, this is stacked against us. We're killing each other now. Either through drugs or through violence on the street. I've already been slashed at 16. The sense of anger and that revenge that you want on people of your own age, from your own community, it suddenly made no sense to me. I grew up with men around me who had scars all over their faces, who'd been stabbed horrendously. And for me, it was normal. I wasn't shocked when I got slashed in the face. I wasn't shocked.
Yeah.
It was just one of those things that was going to happen because I was carrying on like that, And so the next thing is that you might end up, or I might end up with a life sentence, or being killed in a fight, or with a life sentence and being killed in prison.
Yeah.
And that was the end. That's what I could see. And I think the only way that I could see, for me, because it wasn't going to be education. I hated school with an absolute passion, and I still do.
Yeah.
For some mad reason, I just felt like I never fitted in at school. So I was always playing truant from age of 11, right through. I just never attended it. So where would somebody like me fit in? Possibly the army. They could maybe use somebody like me. I could learn skills there, either in fighting, in discipline. They would look after me. And I think deep down, I wanted to belong somewhere where they could actually look after me.
Yeah.
And I could learn something, because all the people who are saying, join the army, son, learn a trade. You can learn to be a technician. You can learn to be, a mechanic, use your brain. And so that was my aim after I got out of, Boston. But within weeks, I'm getting dragged back into stuff. Let's just go and do this. Come and help me on this little bit of work. And without thinking, it was almost like reactive. I was just there.
Yeah. And
then I was shaking my head afterwards, thinking, this isn't it. This is not for me. I need to go. So I went off to join the Royal Marines. I thought, right, let's start at the top and tumble.
Yeah.
And I was told, thanks for coming. But if you're out of trouble for 2 years, if you can keep yourself, I remember the guy, the big sergeant, if you can keep yourself out of trouble for 2 years, pal, we'll have you. And I remember saying, mate, I'm not going to be around in 2 years. I'll either be in jail or worse. Do you know what I mean? So, it's not any good for me. I went off and tried to join the British paratroopers. I had to go and sign on unemployment. The unemployment exchange that I was attached to at the time from my gyro was in Maryhill, because I'd moved from Springburn to Milton in that time. And it was a short time when I was staying with my mum. So I'm just fresh out of jail, not that long. I had to go and sign on and then look for work. And the police station in Maryhill was right next door to the DHSS, who used to deal with all your unemployment claims, which was right next door to the Army recruiting office. Now, I was well known in Maryhill police station. And so I thought, right, I'm not going to join as Tam Carrigan. They're not going to have me. So I went to a really good friend of mine, whose name I won't mention. And I said, look, I really want to escape this. This life is not for me. Can I use your name? And he said, you know what? No, but yes.
Yeah.
So I got his details. I went to join the British Army again, the British paratroopers, and I got into the first test where they come and you have to sit down and you have to write, a load of things, like, can you read? How's your maths? And it was a really preliminary kind of test before they took you off to some sort of camp if you passed. And I'm sitting doing this test. And so I've joined as this other person. I'm sitting doing this test as another person. And the big sergeant comes in during this test and pulls me out. And he said, right, mate, somebody's here to see you, one of your mates. And it was one of the CID who recognized me as he walked past the window. And he's looking, because in those days, it was like a big room. And you done your test,
Yeah.
People can see you sitting at the desk. And he looked really sheepish. His head was down. I thought, fuck, what have I done? He's going to nick me for something. He's recognised, what have I done? I haven't done anything. And he said, I'm really sorry, pal. And but he came in and says to the sergeant, I recognise that boy. That's the best thing he's ever going to do. Is get himself out of here. And he said, that's that Tam Carrigan. And I went, no, isn't that somebody else? I'm not going to mention the name, but he said, that's somebody else. And he went, really? he's still breaking the law, trying to get himself, And he said, look, mate. And that sergeant had the same reaction as the Royal Marine guy. Jog.
Yeah.
Come back in 2 years, yeah. Get yourself right. What are you doing? You know what I mean? Yeah. We would only find out later on it was you and throw you out after having wasted a year with you, possibly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the big copper, he said, mate, I'm so sorry, but you really have to do this right. And I was so pissed off, man. I was so dejected, But I think that helped to give me that little push, I need to get myself out of there. I really do. But the one thing I will say is that the two people that really pushed me to get off my arse and actually do something rather than talking about it was a guy called Andy Lenny and his wife Kate Lenny, who were really sort of instrumental in just going. They were like my straight goer friends, the people in my life that were working hard, and bringing up a family and just saying, Tam, this is going to end really badly.
Yeah,
you're not stupid. You if you move from here, leave from here, do something, get your arse out of this way of thinking. Yeah, you can change your life.
Yeah, well, it's fantastic that you had some people around you trying to push you in the right direction. Yeah. And I guess really frustrating in a way that you felt that just because of the name that you had, you couldn't, continue with what you were doing with the Marines and the military here in the UK. So then obviously you were pushed to join the French Foreign Legion. I guess that was the only option from there. Yeah.
I remember one of my father's mates saying, look, if you can't get into the British Army, try somewhere else. The world's a big place. Why don't you try the French Foreign Legion? And I was like, that doesn't exist, mate. That was like Laurel and Hardy under the camels way back in the day. He said, no, I've known people to leave here and join. And you're a young guy. You've got nothing to lose. So I applied for my passport. I made some money. And one weekend, I just went off to the central station, bought myself a ticket to London. And I was off on this new adventure, And I was crapping myself, mate. I really, leaving everything behind. I told my mum that I was going. I said, look, I'm off. You won't be seeing me. I'm just not coming back. I'm off to France. And she said, right, son, I'll see you on Monday.
Yeah.
And I was like, I was on the train thinking she's right.
Yeah.
I'm going to get to London and where am I going to go? How am I going to do this? I had a half-baked plan. So that was it. I was off to Victoria Station. And each time I was like, oh, what am I going to say? Where am I going to go? I knew that's where you get the train to the ferry to go to Paris, France. You know what I mean? Because other people had told me. I'd known people who had left, Glasgow and came back to the city with stories that they'd been to Europe and all these places. And it was almost fantastical. But here I was in that same situation, just about to buy my first ticket to Paris. And it was a one-way ticket. And so, and I felt okay because I had money. I had at least 400 or 500 quid. And in those days, it was like £14.
Right.
14, 15, but wasn't a lot of money, do you know what I mean? So I jumped the train and it felt like I could always come back. If I can go, I can come back. I can run back really quickly. So off I went. And on the ferry, funny enough, I met a big lad from Birmingham at the bar. And and he was off to join the French Foreign Legion. And I just walked right up next to him. He just looked at me, and I looked at him, and I just thought, right, soulmates.
Yeah.
Instantly, he started talking, and he was off. His friend was in the French Foreign Legion. This is too much of a coincidence. Showed me a photograph of his mate in the uniform and the white kepi and the red epaulets, and I'm like, wow, this is meant to be. So we teamed up, and within 2 days, we're in Fort-Nation in Paris, shaven hair, green fatigues, heading down to Marseille on the next draft, which reminded me of jail, because it's like you have to go to places and wait for the draft to go to Boston, so it's like you went from court to Berlin prison. You waited a week until there was enough youngsters sentenced to go up in the draft. Yeah. And then, so there's about 30 of us on a train, overnight train, heading down to Marseille, and then onto Oban, the selection process, where you were put through quite a stringent filter, to sort of get out the people that weren't going to make it. Yeah. And but then finally we made it through. Met a whole load of other Scots and English people, and we ended up in our instruction camp in the Pyrenees.
Wow. And how long were you in the French Foreign Legion for, Tam? Was it about a year?
It was right? Almost, I think it was, so that was from February up until October. That's it. Yeah. So I went through my instruction, done 4 months of instruction, and then I went to the infantry regiment in Oban, the 1st Regiment of Infantry. But then I went into the music principal of the French Foreign Legion, but I was still a soldier. But they reckoned I had an aptitude for music. You're tested when you're put through your paces when you just join. So they are looking for certain material. So people who might be just soldiers, people who might be admin, people who might have other skills. I mean, they're actually quite clever. And then everybody went to the music principal on principle, and you were tested through your musicality, which was, I mean, for me, it was like some sort of weird audition for Opportunity Knocks. Yeah. Which is the old X Factor.
Yeah, right, okay. But I can imagine, though, that it wasn't exactly what you wanted to do. You had hard soldering in your mind, and they start pushing you down a musical route. So I think it's normal that at that stage you became disillusioned with it. And I think you left, didn't you? You went back home to Scotland, and then you came back to sort of go back in and give it another go. So you went back to Scotland, back to France, and then you were at the gate about to go in, but you never actually went in. Yeah. So I went back. It was months and months later, and I just thought, I'm just going to go back, because you could, and you'd be welcome back in. You'd have to probably spend about a month in Jankers. Yeah, I mean, in the jail, sort of doing cleaning around the barracks, while they then decided, are we going to keep him? But I think I was young enough. I was only 20, 21. I was 20. But then I was so excited going back again, and I was like, until I got to the gate, I jumped a taxi from Oban, got out, and just as we pulled up, the flag was getting, so the whole early morning ceremony where the colonel shows up, he inspects the guard, and then they salute the flag. And I was standing next to the taxi, and for some reason, the taxi driver was stood at attention as well, Right. And I saw all this, and then it was over really fast, and then I seen all the lads all running and shouting, and it, again, and do you know what? I thought, fuck this. Yeah. I'm going to go and have a bit of fun. Yeah. I mean, I'll come back to this in a week. I'm in France. I still get a wee bit of money. I'm going to go and spend all my money, and then I'll have to come back, So I end up in a different city. I went up to Nice, and then met some people there, and then just hung out there for a while. Yeah. And then I just started hitchhiking around France and just having really great fun. Ended up in Spain, and then I ended up going back to London, then back to Glasgow, and then again it was my friends Kate and Andy Lenny that said, why don't you do something with your life that is actually beneficial for other people? So they said, why don't you become a community service volunteer? That would really, that won't ever sort you out,
but it would help other people. You're now got enough knowledge and experience to keep other people on track. So then I applied for this community service volunteer because the war in Glasgow hadn't finished. The drug wars were intensifying. The police were raiding everybody's house. You couldn't go to friends' houses in case you get raided, or you knew that they were either holding drugs or they were dealing drugs. You couldn't walk along the street with them, because you would either get pulled or you'd be involved. You'd be seen to be involved in, the whole thing. And I was really still trying to put that sort of distance between myself and crime.
Yeah, and this is when you moved to Norfolk, is that right?
Yeah.
And you got involved, obviously, the community stuff you're talking about. Is this the project sort of to combat youth offending?
Yeah, it was called Trail.
Yes.
Trail.
So you get involved in a project to combat youth offending, which I guess might have felt quite ironic in some ways, having come from what you'd come from. But not only were you doing that there, but you were also getting into the music scene, I think, at that time, and putting on raves and stuff like that. And also starting to do some photography and bits and pieces like that. So there were quite a few different things going on there. And I'm just wondering sort of how you were feeling in that moment about the direction you wanted to go in.
So I think throughout the 80s, so you have to, so this took up the whole of the 80s. All the things you just described. So when I went to Norwich, Norfolk, I was first for a year. I was involved with a project called Trail that took what they would term hardened offenders, the last chance offenders, onto projects where you would teach them how to build. You would go off and you would build projects, or you would help a community in some way. And then when that came to an end, I moved into Norwich and settled there. I'd already got great friends on the music scene. They were already doing warehouse parties. We started doing warehouse parties and mini raves right throughout the 80s. And life was so far away from being a criminal for a few years until my brothers moved down from Glasgow. We then became a little unit. And we then started seeing opportunities commercially by breaking into commercial premises and stealing safes and opening them and just, and kind of, it just escalated from that. And then I got arrested in Norwich in the mid 80s and I done a 2-year sentence for commercial burglaries. When I finally came out, I was the only one who was left in Norwich. My 2 brothers had moved back to Glasgow and they were doing other things. And so I settled into sort of quiet life, and then I started the music back up again. And that was going great. So I was also working at the Norwich Arts Centre, where I'll be doing, and they would be supporting the rave scene. And we got involved in the campaign to open up music venues because all the music venues for alternative music were shutting down.
Right.
So we were the only alternative in the city. So that felt like a change of direction for me. By 1988, I picked up my first camera. And that was, again, inspired by a really good friend of mine, Paul Hammond, who showed me the basics and rudimentaries of shooting on a single lens reflex camera. And I was in awe of his images. They were just incredible. And but he showed me how to work a camera and my way around, and that then opened a whole new avenue for me. Being seen with a camera, and then people say, "Oh, you're a cameraman, you're a photographer." I like that title.
It's a sense of identity as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it made me feel, windswept and interesting.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's like, I'm a photographer. Put on raves and I'm a photographer, and that it sort of took away something of my old past, where I was seen as as a bit of a dodgy character and a criminal, and I really did want to try and change it. I was getting older, I was in my mid-20s, and I was thinking, life's got to change, mate. You've tried it once, you failed, and let's try something different.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that photography is sort of a really important part of your story going forward.
Yeah.
And I think it was also, was it around this time when you went to Turkey on holiday for the first time? And whilst on holiday in Turkey, you met some Kurdish refugees fleeing Iraq from the Iraq-Iran war. And I think I'm right in saying that you felt sort of, you know, quite touched by their story. And also with your new skills in photography, you thought, you know, I could document this and, you know, share their story with the world, which I think is amazing, really, because it shows that, you know, back in that time, you really did want to do something positive with your life and something that really meant something. And I think you were going to and from there to the Iraq-Iran border after that and flying home. And I mean, it got pretty mental. I think at one stage you had a press card. You were flying around in helicopters with the military, taking photos. I'm wondering if you could talk to us a bit about that time, because it sounds pretty crazy.
From 88, so it was 88 when I went to Turkey for the first time. But through the Norwich Art Centre, there was always photographic exhibitions constantly. So I was really inspired by, and I met a lot of different people. So I'd meet young photographers in particular who were doing the thing that I wanted to do. So I was inspired by that a lot. And it almost gave me a purpose. But then suddenly I found myself in Turkey on holiday with my girlfriend at the time. We met some Kurdish people down in a city called Antalya, and they were telling us about the chemical bombings in Halabja that happened about 3-4 months prior to us going on holiday. And I mean, I never heard anything of it, but suddenly I'm meeting people from that area who'd escaped, and they were trying to flee to the West. And they told me this story, and it was just incredible. You know, I wanted to go and meet these people, see for myself somehow what happened to these people. I mean, they were chemically bombed, and it reminded me of acts of war crimes, against humanity from the Second World War that I used to see on documentaries. And I thought, God, if I could photograph that, bring those images to light and see the people that had survived that, I would, that would be something that I would love to do. Came back to London and really quickly, made some inquiries, made some contacts. And then by November, I was over there. I was way out east on the Iraqi border, trying to get contacts, and it's really difficult. And in those days, it was really dangerous. But for the next 2 years, I'm just, developing my photographic skills, my portfolio, and at the same time, just putting on raves. And then I finally think, right, okay, I'm going to go and do this because there's a war coming, because Saddam Hussein had then invaded Kuwait. I want to be part of that, recording the coming conflict. So I went to the north, and that's where, when I went to, so I had enough mates in Istanbul who said, you need a press card. We can get you a press card for $100. So I went with one of my mates down to the press office in Istanbul, and voila, I had a NUJ card.
Wow.
How did I get that?
Yeah, easy as that.
Easy as that.
Good $100 well spent.
$100, and then that accessed me all areas. Really, I could then just show this press card with my passport, and I moved right through, right up to the Iraqi border, really, really fast. And in those days, you had to go through loads of different army checkpoints, and then. When I got near the Iraqi border and I was traveling late at night, you went through PKK checkpoints because the Kurdish guerrillas then took hold at nighttime. They controlled the night when the Turkish military controlled the day. But then I was allowed right into Iraq. And I remember getting to a place called Jizre, just after Mardin. It's right on the Iraqi border. And it's like a small Kurdish town. And I hooked up with a convoy that was going east. And it was a mixed convoy of American army ammunition and relief and aid, and it was all kind of mixed in. I thought, that's not supposed to happen, is it? Suddenly aid convoy can become a legitimate target for attack. But for me, it was exciting. I can't not say it was not exciting. I really did feel like, oh, this is almost akin to the sort of adrenaline buzz that I was getting from committing crime. But it felt a lot more legitimate. It felt like I had a reason to be here. I felt like I was kind of developing into somebody that might record history, and be known for that. So I was looking to try and to reinvent myself in a way.
Absolutely, yeah. And during that time, did you try and sort of send any of the photos and the material that you'd taken to newspapers and stuff like that? Was that something that you were trying to do?
So I'd done the first part, but I never thought the other part through when I didn't have any context.
Yeah.
So I was like using my resourcefulness to get there. Because in those days you couldn't fly into these places. You had to go overland, and then to legitimately present yourself to army bases and say, "Could you give me an airlift? I'm part of the press corps," to fly around. But then to get your images published and printed, I kind of fell down on that because I went home, printed them all up, and showed friends of them, my friends, and I took some to the Guardian at that time, but they just weren't up to scratch.
Yeah,
they just weren't the things that they were looking for, and they gave me lots of good advice. But I went away sort of disheartened. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I went all that way, and what? And you're not interested in my images?
Yeah.
How dare you?
I can imagine that felt really disappointing though, because you found something that you're really passionate about. You put all this effort in. You've put yourself in a dangerous situation going over there to get them all, and then you come back and it didn't quite work out exactly how you'd had it planned. And do you think that contributed then? Because I think it was around this time that kind of you fell into this almost crazy mix of coming back to the UK and I think taking part in some armed robberies and stuff like that. And then when you had some money and all the rest of it, going back over there to carry on doing the photography. So I'm wondering if you could talk to us about that sort of crazy period of juggling the one sort of criminal side in the UK with that almost humanitarian side, over in the Middle East. It seems like a very strange mix for sure.
Yeah. And total hypocrisy in a way, because here I am thinking about doing crime that would put other people's lives at danger ultimately, and then trying to take images that might go to help other people who are in danger of their lives being taken. So, but I think at that time, I was locked in a fantasy about who I might be, who I might become, and I think I like to pretend to people that I was this really nice guy. And even though that part of me was there, but I was still willing to use the old skills that I had by one, deceiving people, to how I was funding stuff, But in the year that it really proper kicked off was 1991,
right,
where I met an old friend of mine, and he had come into my life again, and he was already robbing stuff, and he said, like, have you get any work? I know that you used to do loads of stuff, Tam, and I would love to, if you and I can get up to something, that'd be great. And I said, actually, I have a cunning plan,
right?
And so we then entered this partnership, where I'd known him, and he was friends with my family as well. So I'd known him for years, but I've known of him. I'd never worked with him before. He's great lad, and somebody that I knew that in that situation I could really rely on. So off we went. We started robbing together, and then in '91 he introduced me to another lad who had escaped from prison. So my friend and I met up with Michael Healy. So there was Michael Healy had this idea of robbing a dispersal bank in Torquay, and we got to meet in Glasgow and discuss how we could rob this place. And from the moment he was telling me, how he planned to do it, I just said, I'm in. He said he as far as he'd he was concerned, and he knew because he'd worked in the bank as a cleaner.
Right.
There was a minimum of about £3 million in this bank. And the way that we were going to do it was we had the keys to the bank. We were going to hide inside a false wall that was already created there, come out, tie all the staff up, empty the vault, and leave without harming anybody. And that sounded to me like, the finale of some movie that I had in my head for my whole life.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so I thought, right, I'm in. So myself and my partner, a lad called Rab Harper, Big Rab we used to call him. We were already robbing. We started on this journey of right, okay, so we're in on this, but it's going to be me and you. We work together. We know that we can work together. We're going to go and work with Michael, his brother, and a couple of other guys from Glasgow. That funny enough, we all knew each other through one connection or another, but we never actually come together to do or commit a crime in our lives. And that's when I met Ian MacDonald, Blink, and a guy called Mick Carroll, who I was in Boston with, funny enough, and small world. And he was already living in Torquay, this guy. And that was Michael's link to Torquay. He was actually hiding in Torquay when he met somebody who was working in the bank as a head cleaner, took the keys, went investigated, discovered it was a dispersal bank, and it should be robbed.
Yeah. And the thing is, so although you didn't actually end up taking part in the actual doing of the robbery, you still ended up being sought for it. And I'm wondering if you could explain a bit about that to us, because obviously you pulled out for reasons that I'm sure you'll explain.
Yeah. So there was a couple of things. We got together as a group. We went to Torquay. So the idea was to go for a weekend and then hit the bank on the Monday or a Tuesday and then leave. Unfortunately, that never happened. We were camped up in caravan parks around the place. And then other people got involved. So people brought their wives down and the girlfriends over from France. There was a couple of French girls that were involved. Michael's girlfriend was from France. The job deadline went from a couple of days, going down, robbing the bank, getting away, to it being a little bit more of an in-depth surveillance job and more of a holiday. And it's like, right, we're not in a hurry. We can just sit here. We'll hit it in a couple of weeks because we need to think about how we're going to get out of here. Once that place gets robbed, this place is going to be locked right down. So the idea was to hit it on a holiday weekend when there were so many visitors into Torquay that it would be really difficult to stop everybody. You know? So that was going to be the cover. But for me, we were there too long, number one. But myself, Ian, and Rab, we were in a hired car. So we hired the car locally, but we had false IDs. And in those days, your license, I had the false license, didn't have any image on it. There was no computerized central information gathering. You know what I mean? So we were going to London to pick up weapons and another car so we could rob this place, be able to sort of ditch the cars and complete the job. But on the way to London, we got stopped by a policeman. This guy stopped us and said that there was a call that we'd be throwing litter out the window. We hadn't, we were locked off. We were on a mission. We were going somewhere. This guy saw us, and I think he saw us for who he thought we were.
Yeah.
Criminals. Mm. And there was just a certain look, I think. And as soon as I saw him, because I was driving, and I had a little bit of a, growth around my chin to hide my scar. And he pulled us out, asked for our names. We all give false names. And he says to us, he said, look, I've not always been a traffic policeman. Anything happens with 100 miles radius of this spot in the next few days. I'm going to remember every one of your faces. And true to that, man, a year later, after we'd been arrested, he picked me out on a ID parade straight away.
Wow.
And I don't think, I tried to say then, I was set up, that he was showing photographs and all that. But I remember that guy's eyes to this day, mate,
Wow.
He took a photograph in his mind of exactly what I looked like, the three of us, and he wasn't afraid of us.
Yeah.
Three big guys sitting there, and he's bent down, and he's just like, he just looked like he could take the three of us and just slap us around. You know what I mean? He said, I'm going to remember every one of you.
Fair play to him for
absolutely
putting himself against some, I guess, intimidating characters.
Well, one of us had a weapon on us. One of us had a weapon on us, and
which could have been used in another parallel universe.
Absolutely,
and that could have ended up terribly, of course. But so when this happened, I think you quite logically thought to yourself, this now does not make sense to do it, because if a huge bank job happens, he knows all of our faces, and so quite logically, you decided to drop out of it. But I suppose probably to your annoyance a bit, the others decided to carry on with it. But by this time you had gone, and so I think you found out about it through in the newspaper
headlines,
and all the rest of it. So could you talk to us about your decision to walk away from it, and then how you eventually found out that it happened?
So so we turned the car around and we went to a pub, and we just sat there and said, right, okay, let's not do this. This is stupid. And we all agreed, Rab and Ian, we thought, right, fuck this. Let's do this another time. It's not going anywhere. Let's go and find something else. Between us, we know that we can go and we can get any amount of money that we really need. We had the bollocks, and we had the wherewithal to go and rob anywhere, And but we decided, right, that's it. It's all done. So we went back. I went back to the caravan. I cleaned the whole place that I was living in, top to bottom. Rab and Ian went to meet Michael, and they all agreed, let's not do it. Let's go think about something else. But that night, they all met up again. I didn't know. I was too busy cleaning that caravan because I was going to leave on the overnight train to London and just get my kit and just head out to Iraq. And so that was my plan. At the time, I was my ex-girlfriend had went off to New Zealand, and I didn't know, but she was pregnant at the time, and she was on her way back, and so things were happening in the background. For me, it was Rab came and said, "We're going to go ahead with this, Tom. Whether you're there or not, we are still going ahead with it." And I'm like, "Mate, you really need to think. It's no use having that money and we can't spend it. Really." And hats off. I mean, he went off and he pulled out as well. I left that night. He left the next morning. He went back to Glasgow, and the four boys went ahead with it. They never got their money. They almost got the money, but they never got the money. And they all got captured in the end. But the headline I will always remember was on the front page of the Sun, I think, or the second page of the Sun. But I read it as I was going to the airport a few days later. And I was thinking, we fucked.
But at that point, were you thinking that you were going to be sorting connection for it, or did you think I've pulled out of this, so I'm probably all right?
No, I didn't. I thought this is going to bring a lot of heat on all of us because we're there. I thought, obviously, as time went on, that I'd slip out of it. Do you know what I mean? Because they won't have witnesses, they won't have any forensic, they won't have anything. They might have my name somewhere along the line. He might remember me. He might be able to pick me out. Something might happen that they get a sniff of me and they put me in the pot with the rest of them, but they won't be able to prove it. And as time went on, the stronger that feeling settled within me, and I thought, well, fuck them. They ain't coming for me.
Yeah.
So off I leave and I head out to Iraq for 4 weeks, and I'm up in the north, and I'm flying around with the French army from one site to the next, photographing, being in this new adventure. So I went from robbing a dispersal bank scenario into another movie. You know, total fantasy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Total fantasist.
Yeah, and of course it all came kind of crashing down when you came back to the UK and you realised that you were wanted for that, I think, and there you make the decision to go on the run, to get as much money as possible and to go on the run.
Yeah.
Could you talk to us about why you decided to do that rather than handing yourself in, and how long that lasted for?
Well, I thought. So I still felt like I would be able to slip out of the charges. Do you know what I mean? And at the same time, though, I had no money. My girlfriend had just showed up from New Zealand and said, "Look, I'm 5 months pregnant. This is it's your child, and I'm going to have it." And I thought, right, fine, but I don't have any money. I've got no home. I've got nothing. So I met up with Rab. And Rab was the one who actually told me that they were looking for him and me.
Right.
So we've got 2 police forces looking for us, Scottish police force and Somerset and Devon. They're hunting us down now, and in connection with this armed robbery. And I thought, well, we need to fly into the sunset with a big bag of money somewhere. So we better get cracking. So we started robbing everything that we could manage, So we were robbing post offices and banks and ram raiding gun shops to get more weapons, so we could go a step up and go into robbing much more lucrative targets rather than some of the little kind of local banks that we were getting, because we were getting about 20 grand out of each, roughly on average, and that wasn't enough.
Yeah,
we had to bank money to get going and keep going forever.
Yeah.
So the pressure was on, and there was a baby coming, and so I got myself a house in the middle of the Norfolk wilds. I knew some people, and they were real straight goers, artists, musicians, photographers, lovely people who I'm still in touch with today, and they've long forgiven me, and I've never lost that contact with them either. And they've been really helpful with me over the years. But also I moved into this huge, big kind of farmhouse, 15th century farmhouse that was shared by other families. So I set up home in the middle of Norfolk. Rab was in London. We would meet up, go and do a job, and then separate, and then meet up just now and again socially to plan our next move. But the police had other ideas. They had already found out where I lived. I was under surveillance for about 2-3 months, and they weren't moving on us until Michael Healy showed up, because they really wanted Michael, and they thought that Michael and Rab and myself were doing these jobs.
Yeah,
and so they were waiting for him to come through the door, and then they were going to kind of capture us all.
At the same time.
At the same time.
Yeah.
But that never happened.
No.
Never happened.
No. And Tam, just before we talk about, the moment where it all came crashing down, which I remember vividly from when you explained it to me, I wonder if you could talk to us about how it feels to take part in something like that, in something like an armed robbery. Is it just pure adrenaline? How do you feel before you go and do something like that? Because obviously it's more extreme than sort of myself or any of the listeners will be able to understand. Obviously, we've never been in situations like that. Are you fearful for your own life? Because, in theory, you could be shot by police. I'm just wondering, did you even value your own life that much in that moment, I guess? Or was it there an element of recklessness to it? If you could explain to us how you felt sort of before you would do one and how it felt during,
I think the run up to a robbery is ceremony. You look into, so you go through the idea, you find somewhere that you're going to rob, and then you're thinking, right, okay, so how am I going to get in? How am I going to get away? I know I can get in here, but getting in was going to be harder. But then it's, what am I going to wear? What's the costume? So there's a whole kind of theatrical thrill, of putting yourself into a role, the costume that you're going to wear, exactly how you're going to execute your role during this thing. I'm going to be on the weapon. Rab's going to be going for the money. So we run through exactly how we're going to do this. And up until then, there's an excitement. There's a real excitement. You're practicing. You're role playing this for a moment. So and you're looking at each other thinking, God, we're really going to do this, So there's not a real sense of danger in any of this. We just know that we're looking at each other as well, kind of, daring each other on, thinking, right, are we really going to cross that line? We put this job together. We know exactly where the cars are going to be from. So we've already eyed some cars from railway stations that are there the whole day, won't be reported to the police in those days. So we've got like a whole day with them. So we go and find where the cars are, which cars are appropriate to drive in heavy traffic that will get us through little alleyways and that kind of things, or is it going to be a motorbike? It was normally motorbike then a car, or motorbike and two cars. So there's an excitement putting this together. There's a real kind of, okay, so we know where everything is. All we have to do now is actually do it. And we do it the night before or on the actual day itself. So we're picking a time for when we're going to hit that bank. We've looked at the bank and thinking, is there a drop going in? When is the money coming in from the money in transit vans? That's going to be the best time to hit it. So all of this thing's got to be on timing, and then it's all luck, because police car can drive right past and just throw a spoke in your show, and then you're running for your life, We're not brave. We're not going to stand there and exchange shots with police, even if they have got no gun. Policemen, British policemen, they're pretty ballsy, man. They'll take you out still. They might hold you, but they won't be. They ain't standing. But I'm not waiting around, man. To one, I'm there to rob. I'm not there to kill anybody. But I've got a loaded weapon. So.
Yeah, there's so much to it, and I guess almost hearing you describe all of the logistics that goes into it, it's almost such a shame, I guess, for you in that moment, and also for any other people that have also been involved in that kind of thing. It's like, because if you apply those skills to something legitimate, whether that's military or whatever it is, you clearly were very good at, assessing these situations and all the rest of it. And it just seems that, those skills could be applied in a legitimate way in somewhere else.
But to be honest, Sam, those skills, you don't see yourself as somebody who wants to even apply themselves to a normal job. Because fuck working. Yeah. Who wants to get up in the morning and do the same thing or run a business and blah, blah, blah. The reason I'm doing this is because I want to be different. Yeah. I want to be somebody who has some sort of recognition or some sort of power, or most definitely have a feeling of power. So it's mixed up with all of this. I can actually do something, and I'm lethal, I'm dangerous. I've got these skills and a willpower to drive myself through something that actually, when you're doing this, when you're actually doing this, you're thinking, what the fuck am I doing?
Right.
I could be killed. It's only when you're actually in that moment, these thoughts then start rattling around in your head, and you push them. Otherwise, you're not going to do it. You push them right to the sort of the back of your mind, and then you become that role. You become that robber. Yeah. You now need to focus up. And guess what? You're not in control of anything. You don't have power. You've got terror on your side and surprise, but in that moment, the terror is with you. You rob the bank. You go in. You rob the bank. And when you're coming out that door, you don't know who's out there, who's waiting for you. You really don't know if the police have been watching that place. You don't know if you're going to run out straight into a bullet, because that's what often happens. You don't know what's going to happen next. You think you're in control. You're not. In that moment, you don't care what happens to you as long as you don't feel it. Yeah. Otherwise, you wouldn't do it. You just wouldn't do it. It's like jumping. Have you ever done a bungee jump?
I've never, no.
Right. Neither have I. But a friend of mine has done it, and he was saying, it's like I'm actually throwing my life away. And right to that point where you're ready to jump, you're thinking, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. And then you're free falling and all the way down until you actually go to the end of the elastic, and then you come back and you feel safe. You feel, oof. And the adrenaline, the rush that you get from committing a robbery at that speed as well. So everything's fast. Everything's moving quicker than normal, you know, so time's passing in a whole different way as well. So you're in, you grab the money, you make sure that nobody's going to grab you, you're out again, and now you're racing to get away. You don't want anyone to see where you're going or the police to get on your tail. And if you do, then you need to drop them quick. You need to escape really, really fast. You don't want to be in a prolonged chase, because the longer you're in a chase, the more likely you're going to get captured. All these things are just running through your head, you know, and until you get to the place, you know, your hideout, your slaughter, where you're going to open that bag of money and start counting it. And that's when that rush starts to collapse. That's when you start to, you know, no one's come through the door for you. There's no loud hailer shouting, right, Tam Carrigan, this is the place. We know you're in there.
Yeah.
You robbing bastard, come out.
Yeah.
You know, you crash, man. You really crash.
I can imagine, almost like coming down off a drug in that moment.
Yeah.
You literally crash.
Yeah.
And you probably,
because it's a chemical.
Yeah, you probably sleep quite well.
Yeah.
Tam, I'm just wondering, because hearing you talk about it, and also having known you for the brief period that I have, you know, I truly believe that every time you went into these things, you absolutely always wanted to avoid any sort of, you know, harm going to anyone involved and all the rest of it. But how did you feel back then? Did you see it almost as like a slightly victimless crime because banks have insurance or whatever and the money would be replaced? Or did you sometimes struggle with, you know, okay, I know I'm not going to hurt anyone, but there's still going to be someone in there that's going to shit themselves when we come in? Do you know what I mean? Like, how did you process that, and has that changed with time when you look back on it?
Yeah, I mean, so in order to do that, you stop thinking. You stop critical thinking. You know what you're going to do. I used to tell myself I'm robbing banks, yeah? But most people who work in banks are women. And the look of absolute terror on their face when you come through that door with a big mask and all this kit on and a big shotgun, yeah? Or a handgun, it doesn't matter. You're inflicting pain on that person. You're inflicting trauma on that person. And I can tell myself the lie that I'm robbing the bank. What's she howling at? It's not her money. The banks are thieves. They're morally corrupt, blah, blah, blah. That's the sort of thing that you use to harm other people with. That's the sort of thing that you drive yourself. Any right-minded person involved in violence has an explanation of why they have to do this extreme thing, you know? And so the lies you have to tell yourself lies that you have to believe in.
Yeah.
You know? You know, I think politicians do it all the time. I think thieves and criminals do it all the time. I was poor. I was hungry. That's why I stole. That's why, you know, someone was attacking me. That's why I took my knife out and stabbed him to death. But he was attacking you with no knife.
Yeah.
You're the one with the knife. Your explanation doesn't hold water. My explanation to myself then didn't hold water. And I knew that there was harm being done, you know, and I'd be a liar now to think I was robbing banks. I never thought I was robbing banks. I knew exactly what I was doing then. You know, how that sat with me was difficult because I know that there was another part of me wanted to do something else, but all my life I'd pushed the boundaries. I'd committed crime. I'd you know, stepped over lines that left me feeling, one, excited, but on the other side as well, I wish that I could feel just normal.
Yeah.
I wish that I could feel like somebody who would criticize me and say, you know, you're so in the wrong, but to be in their shoes of never having done a single thing in their life, I mean, how does that feel? I don't know how that feels to be somebody who's never committed a single crime or pushed a boundary or, you know, I mean, I don't think they exist, but do you know what I mean? It's to having that sense that I'm a upstanding pillar of society and you could always rely on me. I'll never tell you a lie. I'll always be there for you, you know, and I've never done anything. I don't know how that feels.
No.
That to me is alien.
Yeah, and probably there's not many people like that actually do exist. You know, people cover up a lot of the things that they do, right? And, you know, also, it wasn't like you just dropped out of nowhere and were in a bank with a shotgun in your hand. There was a huge sort of lead up to that. And it started from the age of, you know, 10, 11, 12, 13, you know.
Oh, younger.
Oh, yeah.
Younger. I was shoplifting sweets. from I think about 5 or 6.
Well, exactly.
I mean,
Well, there you go. You know, and I personally am of a viewpoint of wanting to understand how people ended up in those situations, because I don't believe that anybody is born, you know, just that way. It's our surroundings that kind of influence us, and I sincerely believe that's what
it's the
happened
permissions in our lives. We pick up signals all the time. We pick up signals from adults all the time. We pick up, well, that's all right. You know, don't swear while they're swearing at you. You know, so you rationalize that, as a child. You mean don't get caught. Okay, so swearing's all right because everybody around me swears, but it's not all right. So don't steal, don't this, that, the other. But the rationale is kind of allowed. So there's a sort of permissiveness that is. There's certain things that are okay. And then you've got characters in people's lives. We knew loads of characters growing up who were always the focus of either gossip or excitement. You know, oh, this guy's robbed the bank, or this guy was in that big fight and he stabbed so-and-so and he stabbed 3 of them, and, you know, he got cut up but he still survived. All these things that made normal life extraordinary. You know, and I remember as a young child feeling excited about that, feeling the adrenaline running, just listening to those stories. It's almost like watching a movie for me, you know. So I could watch a movie. Most definitely remember the first Bruce Lee movie I ever seen. I came out of the cinema kicking lampposts and kicking all my mates up and down the street. And we're all kicking each other, and suddenly we're all kung fu experts. But that sense of excitement and escapism. And I think for me, there was a sense of escaping into crime that gave me a position within a group of my own friends who were doing the same thing. Maybe for different reasons even, you know. I mean, I've come to think lots of my friends weren't just like me. You know, they had really good families, but they were doing the things that I was doing. So what was their reason? Yeah. You know, so, but there's most definitely there's a hook. And once you own that hook, it's hard to come off. You know, some people grow out of it. They grow up and they get a job and they settle down and they just, it was a phase. But for others, like myself, we went full hogger, you know,
of course,
full throttle.
Yeah, no, of course. And, you know, you've changed a hell of a lot since then. And we'll get to that that part of your story shortly. And I could see that when I kind of asked that question that there was quite a bit of emotion there, you know, and I sense that probably there are some parts of it that are quite difficult to grapple with. But as I say, you know, you don't end up in that situation sort of out of nowhere. There's a whole backstory which you explained quite powerfully there. So yeah, and Tam, before we sort of got into that, we were talking about the moment it all came crashing down, and that came about in quite a strange way, really. I think your partner's parent put an advert or not an advert, but a congratulations in the newspaper because you just had a baby, and obviously that said something about, you know, where your whereabouts were or whatever. So the police get onto you, and then one day you're sat in the house and you're driving out and there are some BT vans or whatever, and they swamp down on you. I mean, it sounds like something out of a film, but I'm wondering, if you could just talk to us about that day in your own words, and also how it felt when everything came crashing down and you thought, this is it now.
So that was December 1st, 1991. You know, my first daughter, Ruby, had just been born. She was 3 weeks old. So my partner's 21. She's got a 3-week-old child. We're at home. It's the middle of winter. My older sister and my mum and her husband, my older sister and her husband, and their little baby, and my mum had showed up in Norwich at the railway station. They phoned me about 7 o'clock in the morning. Oh, we're here. And I was saying, so they're saying, come and pick us up. So I jumped in the car. Well, I had 3 cars at that time, as you do, robbing banks. I had these 3 cars. None of them worked. And they were all brand new. They're all brand new batteries, but none of them worked. And I think the police had disabled them, but I managed to get the car that I'd bought from my partner at the time up and running. It's one of those annoying talking cars, a Rover. And so I'm living in the middle of the countryside, and there's a big long country road full of potholes all the way to our driveway. So I jumped in the car, and I remember saying to my partner at the time, you know, I love you, I'll see you later. You know, and it was one of those kind of doorstep goodbyes. And she said, I'll get breakfast on. And she just waved goodbye. And I remember a little baby girl, and I gave her a kiss just before I left. We had a fire all the way through the night, just keeping her warm, because this house was huge. You know, it was 15th century house, it was really cold. But I never got that far. I got around the corner, and I was halfway along the country track, and two BT vans were sitting at the end of that track, and they just moved in. And I could see the guys inside driving toward me. They were big, huge, baldy guys with no neck. And I was like, they're not BT workers. And put my car into reverse, and I was thinking, if I can just get to this gate, there was a gate halfway up, and it went across an old orchard, but another track, it took you right across the land onto another road. If I could just reach that, I'd escape. You know, I'm no longer thinking about my partner at home. And I had a friend upstairs as well who just lost his brother in a car accident. He was just recovering from his car accident, and I forgot about him. I didn't even think about him. I didn't think about anything except for just getting away. And I'm driving backwards, and these guys are coming up, and they're starting to speed up. So I'm starting to speed up. And then suddenly there was an almighty crash. This Land Rover, a police Land Rover, long wheel-based armoured Land Rover, smashed right into the back of me. And within seconds, I was out of that car. It was surreal, totally surreal. They were talking me out. Suddenly I was on the deck. You know, I had a big heavy boot on my head that put my head through a puddle. And I remember the ice all cracking, you know, against my face, and just thinking, this is gone, man. This is over.
Yeah.
This is over. You know, I mean, then being dragged off and swept away to Norwich police station.
Is there fear in that moment, Tam, or is there an element of is there even, maybe you hear about this sometimes, an element of relief that it's finally over, you've been caught, that's it now, you don't have to run, you don't have to hide. What emotions are you going through? I think
there was one that there is that relief never came for a few days for me. You know, suddenly I remember feeling really guilty because I'd left my partner with a tiny baby. And that hit me more than anything. It's just like, I kept asking, where are they? Are they okay? Are they at home? Are they, in the police station? I don't know where or what happened to them. And I remember the police just saying, look, you'll be told later. And then they were saying that, your partner's been arrested as well on suspicion of aiding and abetting armed robbery. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, fuck.
I bet that gets you.
Yeah. That was like, I mean, the world that I was seeing now is like, she was going to go to jail. The baby would be taken off her or have to go and live with her parents. And,
of course.
And then everything was just like unraveled. Everything was unraveling. Everyone was going to know everything.
Yeah.
And that was just...
At that point, the fantasy, you've used this word a few times when we've spoken about, the armed robberies and the crime side of things. And the word you use is fantasy because it's not real. It's not actually tangible, not at least for any extended period of time. And this was where, the fantasy finally came crashing down. And some quite powerful things you talked about there. I mean, especially thinking that your partner could somehow sort of, become involved in the punishment side of it. But so Tam, you were eventually sentenced to 67 years, I believe.
I think collectively.
Collectively at Norwich Crown Court. But obviously they weren't to run concurrently, meaning they weren't to run one after another. They could run side by side. Consecutively. Sorry. Yeah. So in the end, I think it looked something more like 16 years, right?
No, it was 17. So at Norwich Crown Court, I was put on trial with Rab, me and Rab got arrested on the same day. Funny enough, Rab came to visit me that night up in Norfolk with another friend of ours that he'd met in London. And he said, oh, I'm going to go and see Tam and the baby. I haven't seen them yet. And Rab jumped in the car with him. And guess who was in the house? The police were still in the house for 2 days, searching the whole, it was a crime scene. And Rab just drove right into it. And they just grabbed the pair of them and they got arrested. Rab was instantly, he was locked up along with me because they didn't know where he was. They were looking for him and that was just luck. And then they were looking for Michael Haley, but he was still on the run. The lad who was driving at the time was a good friend of ours. He was released, I think 2 days later or maybe a day later. They realized that he wasn't, and the police knew who was involved, who wasn't involved. They weren't making mistakes here. They knew that they had the right guys and that they were going to properly do a good job in putting the right guys behind bars, But it is a fantasy. I mean, anybody with a bit of critical thinking looking at me at that time, mixing these two lives. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Trying to be a hero on one and a total outlaw on the other, and for me, there was a struggle. And the struggle was trying to wake up from a fantasy. I now had a little baby involved in this fantasy and it was really dangerous. They could have, and it was a year later that my partner actually told me that she couldn't go out the house. She really struggled going out the house because when she was arrested, it was as dramatic as I was. They came crashing through the sort of windows. They didn't go and knock on the door and see, oh, excuse me, we've got your partner down there. They smashed right through all the doors and held weapons to that, to her head.
Which is incredibly traumatic.
Put down the bundle, put down what you holding. And she's saying, it's a fucking baby. It's a baby,
Yeah.
And I don't think she's ever forgiven me for that.
Yeah.
It took a long time for her to wake up to it as well, because she was locked in this fantasy along with me because I was lying to her, and I mean, that's one of my biggest regrets, but she could have easily been lethally harmed in that, and also arrested and put in jail,
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, you obviously never intended, your partner at that time or baby to become involved in any way. But I guess that's a powerful message there. If you become involved in that sort of life, you can never separate that fully.
You can, and you're lying to yourself if you think you can. And whatever my intentions were, they were clearly involved in having somebody that I could use as a cover, almost. You know what I mean? So my intention, I can't say, well, I never intended this. I knew that was a calculated risk as well. Things could have happened, but I was willing to put it on the line. So when people say, oh, but I didn't intend this and all that, they're lying to themselves.
Yeah.
That's where the wake up has to come. That's where you really have to think, what the fuck am I doing? It's not just your life, it's at stake here. Or pedestrians or workers, when you take a gun onto the street, into a public space, you're now threatening everybody's life around you. And when the people who are coming looking for you, to make the public safe, they are not going to come and knock with a stick on your door. They're going to come with weapons and a lot more than you have to make sure that you are going to be put into a secure enough place. And guess what? If things happen, and things have happened in the past, people have been arrested who are suspected armed robbers, drug dealers, and their family members have been accidentally killed by the police.
And then imagine trying to live with that.
No. And you don't want to imagine that, do you?
No.
Because that really busts your fucking fantasy, doesn't it? That then takes you into the realm of something else. I mean, you're not the armed robber, the Hollywood type, the sexy movie man. You know what I mean? Yeah. You've just killed somebody. Some, not only maybe you're on, but accidentally, and armed robberies have gone wrong. People have died on armed robberies, Oh, but I didn't mean to kill him. I didn't mean to shoot that person. Well,
but I love how honestly, Tam, you talk about this looking back now, about all the things that could have happened, the bad things that did happen, and not painting it in a good light at all in any way, and as I say, you can see in your face there's real emotion when you talk about these things. I can see that they affect you, but at least prison was a place where the sort of the full change happened for real finally. But before we get to that in full, how did it feel receiving a 17-year sentence? Because I think I spoke to you before and you said that actually you were expecting life or something more than that. So it kind of sounds strange actually to say that you might feel relieved with a 17-year sentence. But how did you feel when that hammer comes down and that, that's what you've got to serve?
So at Norwich Crown Court, we received a load of sentences, for a lot of the crimes that we're found, guilty for. So overall, the largest sentence was 17 years. I think I got a couple of 16s and a 12 and a 7. And then 3 months after that, I went to the Old Bailey with all the other boys from Glasgow, and we went on trial for the Torquay one. And then I received the 16. At that point, even my barrister was saying, look, you and Rab could end up with a discretionary life sentence. So you need to prepare yourself. With the 17, when we got the 17, we went straight from the Crown Court in Norwich to Whitemoor, HMP Whitemoor, which was our latest brand new maximum security prison. And I'd already been on remand almost for 3 years. So when we went there, we were received by people that we knew.
Right.
So the fantasy club just continued. You know what I mean? It was just like, wow, okay, boys, now we're here. There's no way that I'm showing any emotion. There's no way that I'm even connecting with that part of myself that's regretting anything. I'm just thinking we'll get to the appeal, and we'll either get off on appeal or some technicality, or they'll have the sentence. I'm still up for fighting and trying to get a lesser sentence. But 3 months later, we got a 16 on top of the 17, and we were lucky. The judge, I don't know why, said that the 16 would run concurrently with the 17. So we were, ultimately, myself and Rab were doing 17 years.
Right.
Michael Healy got 19 years to run consecutively on the 12 years that he had started doing before he escaped prison. So ultimately, he was doing a 31-year sentence.
Wow.
So it shows within our group, that judge wasn't being, I don't think he favoured us, but he certainly was showing an example, making an example out of Michael, who'd already escaped from a prison.
Yeah.
A lawful custody.
Yeah, and I can imagine, you can't show any emotion when you go into a place like this. It's especially being surrounded by other criminals and stuff like that. You certainly can't have a little emotional moment about the fact that you've got to serve that amount of time. Tam, I'm wondering if you could try and paint a picture for us about just what serving prison time is like, in terms of, is it claustrophobic? Are there times when you think, I can't deal with this? Is it actually easier than you think? And I know when we spoke before, you said you'd seen all of the stuff that you saw in there on the streets, whether that's a stabbing, whether that's violence or whatever. But even still, for someone who was, hardened to it, were there still aspects of it that were really difficult?
I think for me, it was institutionalization. That was the thing that really that hit me more than anything, is seeing grown men, really not be able to cope. So whatever fear you might have in yourself about not coping, you're already seeing that on the landing where you're kept. There's already people who are close to suicide. There's already people who are really vulnerable and being picked on, being abused. There's already that sense that you're in an environment where nothing's going to change for years, for decades, nothing, and you're in an environment where you're witnessing some of the most horrendous violence that you might ever see, just as a part of the process of waking up, having your breakfast, seeing a man get his throat cut, his whole insides slashed open, and carrying his innards to the centre fucking office. Can you let me out to the medics? You know, with his stomach in his hands, and it's just like, okay, didn't see anything. You didn't see anything.
Yeah.
You know? So you shut your mouth. Get behind your door. And but I think for me, that sort of thing you can normalize because your filter now, you're either going to go nuts or you've already developed a filter, or you might even have been born with a filter that is actually can take a lot. Yeah. But lots of men don't. You know, for me, there's that sense of repetition where you're never doing anything else. You just might get stoned. You just might be drinking hooch. There's no change in your routine. And so over years, that just wears your brain down. You know, the sense of identity that you might have, you know, it's kind of lost up in a future that might never happen either. You know, one day I'll get out. Yeah. You know, but not being able to control when you eat, not being able to control when your door's open, when you go and exercise, you're told the buzzer goes, bzzz, breakfast, bzzz, exercise, bzzz, work, bzzz, lockdown. You know, and you, over time, that sense of being a rat is real.
Right.
You know, and that's I think the thing for me was that I looked around and I saw the people who were fighting against that, who were changing their routine every day. Because the violence didn't scare me. The prison politics didn't scare me, you know, because I could handle that. But becoming institutionalized was one of the scariest things.
Wow.
You know, I wanted to, you know, I thought, fuck, 17 years, let me think, God, I can get out when I'm 40. That's a whole different life. I know people at 40.
Yeah.
I know that they've made a whole different life, you know. And I had people around me who were much older and had been in for a lot longer, and they were already doing this kind of thing, and they'd already pinned it, you know. So they were doing art, they were doing education, they were doing physical fitness, they were doing their own cooking. You know, they had a little society within the regime itself, and you had to be invited into that, unless you were going to make it yourself. But then you're on your own, and that's you don't want to be on your own. You need someone to hit off. You need someone to say, look, there's a course that you might want to do. You know, it gets you out of your cell. You'll be qualified in this, and then you can go into another thing. So GCSEs leads to A levels, leads to Open University, and that's the road that I went.
Yeah,
that's the road I took.
I remember you mentioned before that education was so key in your sort of story of change, and I know you studied a sociology degree and some other bits, but we'll get to that in a minute, because before we get to that moment of when you decided to turn things around and go to Grendon and all the rest of it, I know that before that and this was one of the things that I loved about your story actually, and I told you about this when we were speaking earlier in the year, and that's when you told me that you worked as a Samaritan in the jail for a couple of years, I think between 95 and 98. And effectively what that is, I think, for anyone that doesn't know, is you're essentially a sort of a shoulder for prisoners that are struggling. You listen to people that have various problems, and I guess the ultimate goal is to try and curb some of the prison suicides that happened. And I know this was also close to your heart because you had a friend who committed suicide in jail. But you know, not only throughout your story are there loads of examples of you wanting to get away from that life and wanting to change, but also there are so many examples of you wanting to do good, you know, wanting to do the humanitarian stuff in the Middle East, and then also when you find yourself in prison, wanting to step up and do that Samaritan work. And I love that. And I wondered if you could just talk to us about why you decided to do that and how you found that experience.
Yeah. So I think that there's two things that happened in prison. The authorities, in response to the high numbers of suicide and self-harm, got together with the Samaritan organization, which helped people who are really depressed or near or thinking about taking their life. So they set up a scheme called the Listener Scheme. We then, so inmates could apply to go on that, and be trained by Samaritans, or the people that trained the Samaritans, and you could become a listener. I think it was set up in 92 or 93, and they were seen with some skepticism amongst the prisoners. Do you know what I mean? Like this was just another way to tick a box for you, to cozy up to the authorities, to make your reports start to glow. You have to remember, we live in a totalitarian world in jail. The only thing that's going to help you progress through that environment is good reports. Yeah. Now, we are some of the most dangerous people in the country, but we want to get out as fast as possible. So I saw that initially as this is just kiss ass way of you getting to score brownie points with the regime. There's no such thing as you fucking listeners. We help each other on a daily basis. Men are just there for each other when they break down, when their families break down, all the time, unofficially known as anything. But then prison officers are the same. You won't hear that from prisoners often, but there's prison officers there who will help you and who have helped you and who have untied people who are almost dead and saved their life. You know, they're not listeners. They're prison officers. There's other inmates that have held cut arteries, you know, and glued them back together, man, and kept these people alive who are not listeners. But where I felt that I had a change of heart where the listeners were concerned as I was in Long Lartin. And a friend of mine, a man that I got to know through living on the wing with him and then having children's visits. His missus used to bring his kids. My missus used to bring my kid up. They got friends and they lived in the town nearby. So my partner used to come and stay overnight with his missus. And so we all got really close. And, but,
take your time, mate. Honestly, we can move on if you want.
No, good.
Yeah. But take your time, Tam. Yeah. Honestly, you know, as long as you need, mate. As long as you need.
I think sometimes you know these events are so far away and so much has happened, but it takes moments. You know, I can see him smiling. I can see him with his kids on visits, throwing them up in the air, spinning them around, sitting down together and just eating snacks and talking about when we will finally be out, when will Daddy finally be coming home. I remember all those things, but he's never coming home because he hanged himself a Sunday morning, and I remember in the aftermath of that, his wife being brought to the wing during our lockup. I knew this was going to happen because one of the prison officers was saying that, look, when you're locked up, we want you locked up a wee quick because we want to let this woman see where his final moments were, you know what I mean? As a way of getting some closure. But that was for me, that was a moment. That was a minute for me that just changed me. And in the aftermath of that, you know, it wasn't straight away, but in the aftermath of that, I joined the listener scheme. That meant that if other people recognized you as being somebody that they could approach and just have a chat to, or in particular at nighttime, you were allowed to, if somebody needed someone to talk to through the night, just to get through that night, you could go in their cell with them. You'd be locked up with them. And you would just be there for them for the whole night.
Wow.
You know, and just talk. And that only happened for me a couple of times. But and you never know because there's no measure, is there? Did that save that person's life, or did that person have a rethink? But
I think if somebody's got to the stage where in that sort of high testosterone environment where things can be looked down upon or whatever, if somebody's got to the stage where they actually, call upon you to come in and chat to them, whatever, I think that says that they've got to a certain point, right? Yeah. And so, obviously you can never quantify just how much it might have helped, but I would hazard a guess of saying, it would have made a real impact for some people. And I certainly would, hold on to that if I were you. I mean, and also it's not about really so much the impact that it may or may not have had. It's about the fact that you stepped up and you wanted to do that, and that you felt motivated to do that. Especially after what happened to your friend. That's the important thing. It's about the feeling that provoked in you, and probably, you've carried that on into life beyond prison, for friends, family, people you meet or whatever, So I'm sure that you've taken a hell of a lot from it, and I'm sure that you gave a hell of a lot to, the couple of other people for that experience. And thanks for sharing something that obviously, is extremely upsetting for you to revisit, and I'm conscious that, going through a really detailed podcast like this of your life story, when probably these aren't things that you talk about on a day-to-day basis, so it must be very difficult at times to go through it all in so much detail. So I really appreciate you doing that. But Tam, the next sort of crucial moment in your story, was this point where you really decided, I'm going to do everything I can to change, to not be institutionalized and all the rest of it? Because you mentioned a few things that sort of pulled on my heartstrings when we were doing the sort of phone calls when I was getting to know you before doing the podcast. And there was one quote that I think stuck with me, and that was when, your daughter said to you when you were in jail, like, Daddy, if I say sorry, will they let you come home? Yeah. And now I can imagine, I don't care how tough you are in that moment, that's gonna put, that's going to pull on some.
Man. She was 6.
Yeah.
She was 6. And I think children who are children of people who are in prison for a long time, long-termers, they grow up with their other parent. If the carer is still bringing them to a jail with this idea that they are in this institution. I mean, I can understand that from my own point of view as a child, thinking that my dad's in jail and why, and we were never told, But for me, so we used to have these things called family visits, and my partner at the time, my daughter's mum, would leave us for the last half an hour, just by herself, and she would sit off and have a coffee, and we would just roam around, and we would just be playing. And she used to go up to the window at the back, and this was her little chance. It was her signal that's where she would ask me questions. She would ask me questions about friends and family, and she would tell me all her things. Her day at school, who was her friend, who was mean to her, what she liked the most. And there was a day when we were just looking out, and the light was fading, and it was winter. And she was saying, why do all the men have Shiba dogs? Big Alsatian dogs. So that's the patrol guards with their dogs. Why do they have Shiba? Well, we had an Alsatian dog at the time as well. And why do they have Shiba dogs? And name was Shiba. I said, well, that's to keep people inside who want to try and get over the walls. And she said, really? But why is the wall so high? And I said, well, we're not allowed to come out yet. And that when we do come up, we'll come through the way that you and Mum go. But sometimes some people try and jump the wall, try and go over the wall. But does the wall go right round this house? And I'm like, it does, yeah. And then she said, Dad, is this a prison? So we'd never told her. We'd never said anything until, and we had agreed. Myself and her mum said, as soon as she starts asking, then we'll tell her. We'll explain. And she said, but why are you in prison? And I said, look, I stole a lot of money. Instead of getting a job, I thought it was easier to steal money. And if you steal money, if you break the law, that's what it's called, being a criminal. And I became a criminal. And so the police come and they put you in here. And you've got to stay until they say that you can go home.
Wow.
And that's when she said, but why can't you say sorry, Dad? And I said, I've said sorry so many times, and I'm so sorry to you and your mummy. And she says, but what if I say sorry for you, Daddy? Will they let you come home tonight? And I lay down, because we're right next to these low windows. I lay down and I could feel I couldn't speak.
Yeah.
You know? And she was just looking at me. But you're looking at a child's face and there's no comprehension. There's nothing there that is malign, is malicious, is deceptive. There's nothing there. And it's just this understanding. And I'm saying, I'm so sorry. That's not going to happen. And there's no understanding why you wouldn't just say sorry and it'd be okay. It'd be all right. Why would they keep you here if you were really sorry?
Yeah.
You know? And her mum came over at that point, you know, and she said, look, Daddy's crying. He's upset. And, you know, and I got up and I was going to say something, and she went, but it's too late to say sorry. It's too late. And, you know, in that minute, in exactly what she said, there was an exchange between me and her mum. And I can tell you she woke up. And I was looking at a different woman, because she's looking at her child now in this situation, and she's like, this is the last time. She knows now. That's it. We're done. And there was not a word passed us by. And a week later, when she came up and said, right, I'm out.
Wow.
I'm gone.
And I can't imagine how hard that is to deal with when you're locked inside and you can't do anything about it. You know, your partner leaves you, your kid is obviously asking you these really difficult and emotional questions. It's and then you have to go back to your cell, you know, and get back on with day-to-day life, and you're locked in there with your thoughts. And I think that's actually, you know, another reason why I think the change that you made and some of the decisions you made after that was so impressive, because I think, you know, it'd be very easy in that situation to fall on things like drugs or whatever else, or thoughts of, I don't know what, to deal with that. But you made a really crucial decision, and that was to try and get yourself into Grendon. Now, for people who aren't familiar with Grendon, it's a prison which basically uses therapy as that right time, relies on therapeutical approaches to try and rehabilitate you rather than sort of punish you, I guess, in that way. But the problem is it's kind of seen, I guess, as at times, or was seen when you were in the prison before going there, by some of the criminal fraternity as almost like rolling over.
Absolutely,
you know, and you know, because obviously also there are some quite unsavory people in Grendon. You know, we're talking about, you know, paedophiles, rapists, people like this, you know, and so some of the hardened criminals like yourself and the other people that you had in the prison, you know, I think when you mentioned that you were considering it, people tried to convince you out of it. It just shows just how dead set you were on this mission. That regardless of all of that sort of peer pressure, you decided to go anyway, because you knew deep down that really to make a cemented change, probably, you know, a therapeutical approach and all the rest of it might actually help. And fantastic that it obviously did, you know, but yeah, I'm wondering if you could talk to us about that decision to go to Grendon, and then if you could tell us about your experience in there.
So when I decided that, well, I never decided, you know, I like to think that it was my decision. It wasn't. It was like it was that moment when you fucking wake up, and you find yourself in jail, you know, because right up until that point where I had a partner's support with a child, I had a future. I had this whole future ahead of me that I was really concentrating on, and it was supporting me on a daily basis. And it's gone. What am I going to do now? You know, that fantasy just popped along with every other fantasy. It's like, I'm coming back into prison. I'm looking at men being released, and within a year, men that I considered, you know, and you know, I've said this several times, but men I considered a lot more smarter than me, a lot more well-supported financially and impressively, with a plan to go out, start the business, do all this, you know, the same road that I was saying that I was on, but actually these people were already for release. they're going to go out, they're going to go and make it, you know. And within a year, I was seeing them coming back in with a 20 years recommended, some with life. And it's like, fuck, what happened to you? And then they're like, mate, this isn't real. This is a dream, this. You can train as much as you like. You can educate yourself as much as you like, but you're a thief. You're a fucking criminal. You think that you're going to just go out there and slot back in again. It's not going to happen, because you're going to rely on your own. As soon as you get into any kind of trouble, financial or relationship-wise, you're going to go right back to your old selfish ways again. Yeah? Because you haven't changed. You've just been on hold. You've you know, no matter what you say that you're going to go out and you're going to do, you think after a decade of a maximum security jail and these conditions that you're just going to go out there and thrive. You know,
it's not going to happen.
Obviously, they were talking about their own struggles, but that was a much more real link to me than the other people that were successful. I knew other people that were successful, but that was a much more direct, real link. It's like, fuck, you know. So as soon as I started taking drugs again, as soon as I started struggling financially, I had a car to run, I had my flat, I had this business idea that I was just using to run drugs through, and it's like these clever men, you know, end up back in nothing. Fuck, I ain't going to do this, man. I'm going to need help.
Yeah.
You know, who am I going to ask for? I don't have anybody out there that I can trust that would even like me. You know, I mean, I'm going to be in my 40s, starting again with nothing. You know, I don't have that child and that partner anymore. That's gone. I can't move back to Norfolk where I was living. That's all gone, you know. So for me, there was that sense that the only place that might offer me somewhere, and this is where I'd remembered the advice of an old friend called Mark Leach. This guy went through Grendon and had become a successful writer, you know, publisher, a legal executive, a restaurant owner. This guy had really sort of taken off. I latched on to my relationship with him, even though it was, you know, I hadn't seen him for nearly 10 years. But I got in touch with him again, and he said, look, you know, if you decide to go to Grendon, you need to remember, Tam, you know, they'll strip you down, man, but they won't build you back up again. And unless you really mean it, unless you really go and make that change, pal, and actually work hard, because it's going to take a lot of hard work, you know, and you're walking away from everything that you've, you know, right now, you've got mates in there that see you as like a staunch criminal, a staunch prisoner, you know, one of the boys. You turn your back on all that. As soon as you make that application, mate, and people start hearing you're going to fucking Grendon, some of them will say, yeah, he's trying to work his ticket. But actually, when you get to Grendon, they weed you out. Like the French Foreign Legion, they shake you up and put you through a filter. And if you're not up to scratch, you're out. You're gone. You know, and but I was terrified of the future. I thought, if I'm going to walk through that gate, and within months or even a year, even 2 years, I'm going to come back into jail. I've already met old men in prison who are here forever. They aren't getting out, you know, and they're ex-armed robbers. They are coming back and coming back and coming back. And I think there's the rest of the world I want to see. There's something else in me that I want to go and do.
Yeah.
You know, there's another life for me to have. You know, I'm grieving this one that I'm not going to have. I'm not going to have this child in my life the way that I wanted it. You know, a family and maybe more children with a mum. And that's all gone. That's all, that fantasies, that's over. And guess what, mate? The right person has woke you up from that. Do you know what I mean? She's not going to be following you around. You know, she's already got that life and it's not yours.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So
an incredibly brave thing to do, to turn, you know, to sort of, to fight against the peer pressure of people that didn't want you to go, and to take, it's one thing realizing you need to change, but taking the huge step towards doing it and putting yourself in Grendon and going through all those paces, is an incredibly difficult thing to do, and something that you should definitely be proud of, because there are so many people that will go through their whole lives. I mean, you said it yourself, there were other armed robbers like you were that would come back and back again and probably were stuck in that cycle for life, but you made an incredibly brave and intelligent decision to do something that was seen by some of them as probably a weaker thing to do or whatever, and obviously it's benefited you hugely to get to the place you're in now. But Tam, could you talk to us about what the day-to-day life is at Grendon? Because obviously you explained to me in detail, but for someone who's listening and they think therapeutic prison, what the fuck? Could you talk to us about how it works and how it benefited you at all?
Yeah. I mean, Grendon, it's it's been around for more than 50 years, and it's run on the principles of a democratic community. So there's 5 different wings plus an allocation wing, and again, you've got almost anywhere between, in those days, 4 weeks to 3 months for you to settle in, and if you can't settle in with the work, then they'll shift you into mainstream again. They'll just put you back into prison again. And then each wing is run on a democratic model of therapeutic responsibility, if that makes sense. So once you're on the wing, you are allocated a therapy group. So there could be, say, 5 to 8 groups working at any one time within a wing, and there's about 45 men on each wing.
Right.
So there'll be a chairman, a vice chairman, there'll be a social rep, environmental rep. Everybody will have a job within that community that they're responsible for, and they're answerable to the community that you're serving. If you're not on a job, you might be on full-time education or in one of the workshops or working in the kitchens. But you'll have a responsibility that you've got to report to the community twice a week. So there'll be Monday, Wednesday, Fridays was your therapeutic, was your therapy group sessions. Yeah. So that's 9 o'clock in the morning till 10:30, and you will work through whatever issues are coming up. And then on a Tuesday and a Wednesday was the wing meetings. So the community wing meetings, where you would keep house. So any issues that were coming up within the community, and that could be from somebody taking drugs, somebody intimidating another member of the community, or something within the staff group, or changes within the regime. All these things were openly discussed and then voted on things. If there was a person, very often you used to hear, when you go to Grendon, you become a grass, because you'll grass on somebody who's had a puff or is taking a bit of kit, heroin or whatever. They'll make you into a grass. And it's like, so you've come in to an environment where you're going to expose some of the most vulnerable things in your life in order for you to unstick yourself, move through a process that at the end of it, you're hoping that you're a better person for it, that you can go out and you can function in the world without harming anybody and yourself, or making yourself vulnerable. You're looking for strengths. And at Grendon, you can certainly find that. But what a lot of people don't understand, and it's like, anyway, they'll grab hold of little bits of gossip or particular one-off events. But in Grendon, you're given chance upon chance upon chance. Nobody expects you to change overnight. A lifetime of behavior that's got you a huge sentence, that's either got you a life sentence or an extremely long-term sentence in jail, where you've acted in a way that society says you're off the streets, and we'll let you out when we think you're safe enough. Well, what about you thinking you're safe enough? Because that's what's asked at Grendon. How safe are you? You need to ask yourself that, and then other people in your group will fucking tell you if you're lying to yourself, if your story kind of rings true, and they will work through your life with you. You go in there and you're a part of a process. Men have come to understand why they've done some of the most horrendous things that we rank in our society, either against the most vulnerable or even against your partner. Why you're robbing, why you're selling drugs, what kind of impact that's had on you, and why are you sitting around this group with people that I might think as an armed robber, you're a fucking paedophile, you're the lowest of the low, but what's got me a ticket here?
Yeah.
What's brought me to this table? Guess what? Ordinary Joe is not coming in. He's not part of this. If I'm going to go out and change the way I think about myself, the way I see, the way that I want to present myself and have a successful life without harming other people or bringing my children into any danger, then I need to really fundamentally understand what makes me tick. So through that process, for me, there was a long struggle. First of all, you've got to understand that in Grendon's no different from any other jail. Every jail has rapists, paedophiles, people who kill the old, people who kill their partners. Jails aren't full of hitmen. They're full of people who have taken the lives of people they're supposed to love. Robbers who've lied to their closest. They've taken them on a ride. And they've destroyed their lives because they're waiting for years for a partner who might or might not come out of jail. But when he does, will he take them straight into that same life? Your life is on hold. For me, my partner's life was totally on hold. She was waiting for me, and the lies that I was telling her, running up into being arrested, kept her in the dark, kept her thinking that I was some sort of lovable rogue, and not a really dangerous person who actually needed to be locked away, and once you wake up, she woke up, and when she did, I was gone. I'm not a part of that life. She doesn't have that fantasy anymore. When I woke up, it was like I need to get rid of that part of me as well. That was actually dangerous to other people. Going to Grendon for me transformed my life. It really did. Wow. I don't mind who says, oh, you were in jails with nonces. Every fucking jail's got nonces in it. I don't mind who says, oh, you were fucking working your ticket and look at you now. And mate, I went through a process that was traumatic. You're revisiting things from your life that you have no idea that you've locked away, that you've cut off memories and you've cut off feelings. Just about not having a sense of safety around you, or that your family fell to pieces, and that some of the emotions that come out of that, some of the parts where you hardened yourself as a little boy, made you able to go off and do even harder things. To pick up a knife and stick it in someone, to go off and steal weapons and live ammunition and then go and stick it in the face of somebody's mum who worked in a bank. All of this stuff you had to unravel, and you want to, if you want to judge people, that's your prerogative, and we do it all the time. Would I today leave my own child with a reformed paedophile? No, I wouldn't. Not at all. But then would a banker let me work in a bank? Yeah. I don't think they would.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But for me, there's an army of people who work and who support what's going on in Grendon, who are totally invisible, and they're helping to produce people to leave long-term imprisonment and just slide right back into society and live really fruitful lives and not harm another single soul, but at the same time learn how to effectively change people who have been extremely dangerous
When we spoke about this before, you said that you had a particular sort of breakthrough after having been there for about a year, and that also psychodrama sessions played a big part of that.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering if you could talk to us about what you realised in that breakthrough and kind of how you felt after it, I guess.
Yeah. I think my having been there roughly for about a year and attending my group, and the other men on that group, they were, you can shine a light on other people's issues. People are great at that. You can look at people, you can hear stories, and you can tell other people what you think their problems or where they might have went wrong. But when that light is shone back on you, and you don't like the feedback that you're getting, you don't like people telling you the damage that you might have done, in particular to the women that were caught up in your crime. Armed robbers don't see that they are particularly offensive against women. Crimes against women are seen as being the lowest of the low. Crimes against children are the fucking scummiest things that can ever happen. So why would someone try and tell me that I'm in that sort of category? I rob banks. I don't harm anybody. I don't leave anybody shot up or cut up or wounded or raped. But what is armed robbery then? If you're not threatening somebody's life, their very soul, their very being, you might not think that I'm here to do that. They don't fucking know that. They think they're going to die in the next second, And certainly I know that I left some people like that.
Yeah. And I guess, realizing, and it's a really difficult thing to do, and it kind of goes back to that question that we spoke about earlier, but I'm sure that, realizing that made you see things in a different way. But by that point, you were already so on that journey of change. And I think it's fantastic that group therapy sessions helped. I think it's fantastic that psychodrama helped.
But the one thing, if I can just interrupt, Sam, the one thing that I failed to take on in the feedback that was given to me, was that I was somehow emotionally detached from the story that I was telling. There was no passion there. There was no recognition of what I was doing. I was still in that mode of, I'm only robbing banks. These are abstract, imagined values that you've got. If you work for a bank, surely they tell you if somebody robs you, just let them have the money. So that's all the explanation that I need. The lie that I'm telling myself, I believe in more than anything.
Yeah.
So as I can go and help myself, I can go and do it. They'll go home, they'll be fine, they'll get compensated. They can have a holiday, they can have 6 months off with pay. All the lies that you need to do to perform the thing that you're going to do, it's distortion. So with that mind, with how I'm looking into the world, I'm totally distorted. What I need to do, and here's a photographic thing, is fix my lens.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I need to look out into the world with pretty much a standard lens that everybody else is using. It's not fucking right to go and rob people, Tam. It's not right to go and stick things under people's noses that you're threatening their life. It's not right to go and harm people like that. And my group then, because I always had an answer for them. I'd always tell them a story and then take them off, up into another story and then up into, some avenue and leave them there. I'd take them home with me. I'd take my group for a year. I'd take them home with me and leave them at the door. You didn't hear what happened in my house. You didn't know how I felt when my dad went to prison. You didn't get to hear when I saw my mum breaking down in tears and because she'd lost her 3 boys. You didn't get to hear any of that because I cut all that off. I'd locked it all off away in some little space where nothing could ever get to, especially myself. That's when they were saying, you know what, Tam? The fucking story's great, mate, but the content's empty, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
How about psychodrama? So my therapist, a man called Joe Marr at the time, an incredible practitioner, had a huge impact on my time while I was there. Big Scouser. You know what I mean? He said, you're either on this or you're off, you know? He gave me 2 ultimatums, actually. When he interviewed me for his wing, he said, you're either on education or you're on therapy. And I was halfway, I was halfway through my Open University degree. He said, what's all the busyness about, Tam? You know, you're learning music, you're learning sociology, you're doing the languages, you're constantly busy. If you're coming on the swing, no education. 6 months, no education. I just want you sitting your ass every day. You can scrub the toilets. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, my plan is that your fucking plan is nowhere. Yeah. You're either going back to prison today. So you make that decision. In fact, he said, I'm off on holiday. I'll see you when I come back. I'm like, fucking holiday. You're off on, what you tell me? You're off on holiday. Make a decision and you'll see me when I come back. And so I made that. I actually made that decision. It's either you're doing this right, and this guy knows something that you don't, or you might as well just go back and just sit your years out, you know. And I had another 6 years, maybe 7 years to go. So I gave that up, and then I said, right, okay, psychodrama. But I was fucking terrified of psychodrama. When I first went on to Grendon, I was on D-Wing, into Grendon on D-Wing. I heard psychodrama first. I walked onto the wing and there was a scream. It was like someone was being murdered. Someone's been actually having their life. And I've heard that before, their life taken from them. And I'm like, fuck's sake, what the fuck's that? And my mate said, that's psychodrama. And I said, fucking sounds like somebody's being killed. And he just turned around and cold. He said, well, they probably are. Because somebody's reliving that moment.
Right.
Of when they've actually killed somebody, or they've witnessed the death of somebody really fucking close to them. And the power of psychodrama, I can't even, you know, it's hard for me to explain to somebody who, or maybe an audience, that you might see this in movies and feel really touched like you're there. But when you know that somebody who has taken someone's life is reenacting that, or at the moment of when they've been abused or something like that, it's fucking getting, you know, they're unsticking this moment.
Yeah.
The other people in that group are holding different roles for them. You know, there's a primal scream going on. I mean, that really, it goes right through the building. You know, and the first time I heard that, I was terrified. I was like, "Fuck that! I'm not doing that. No way you're getting me on that, man. No danger."
Yeah.
But you know, a year into psychodrama, and I felt like a new man. I felt like a different person. I felt like I could talk from my heart rather than my head. You know what I mean? I felt like, you know, there is a period where you go through and you're fucking crying all the time. And you feel really vulnerable and sensitive, you know, and anything that anybody says to you, you've got no strength. You know, every lie you've ever told is stripped away from you. Every wee bit of armor that you've managed to accumulate over your lifetime is ripped off you, you know, or gently unhooked in some cases and put to one side, Sam.
Wow. So what were you acting out, Tam, in those? For you, was it sort of, it was some of the crimes that you'd committed and also sort of relationships with family members like you?
It goes right back to mum and dad. It goes right back to home and what's going on at home. And often it's the things that I'm missing, you know. So missing my dad, you know, watching my mum struggle, seeing the effects on the family over the years. Just seem to, you know, the link where we all sort of crumble. You know, the 3 boys get taken into care. My mum's in fucking bits. She's pulling us all back together constantly. Any time she's there. She's there for us. She wants us all, you know, back as a family again. You know, to the point when in my teenage years, my mum and dad actually got back together again. But then it just went to fuck. Do you know what I mean? Because the years in between, the damage that had happened between them and the distances were just, you know, too vast to cover. And but trying to deal with it and trying to feel like how that felt like. You know, if you've seen a child and the mum and dad's like, right, we're splitting up, right, we're gone. It's like, you know, that child would be in bits. But for us, it was like, who cares?
Yeah.
You know, you lock all of that emotion away. You lock it all in. And I'm not saying that this then led me to be an armed robber. It didn't. But some of the emotional stuff most definitely gave me the ability to then act in a different way, to detach myself from what I'm actually going to do here, you know, to lie to myself and believe it, you know, and to carry out something, you know. But reliving those crimes as well, because I didn't feel like I had any victims, you know. So first victims are the people that are around you, you know, my wife at the time, and my child, who I've totally lost, and it's like, you don't even see that, you know, and suddenly, and even though that might be in your head somewhere, that little guilt, that creeping guilt, you can push it away by again, using the lies that you always tell yourself. Well, she knew what I was, she knew what I did. No, she didn't. You know, somebody believes one thing about you. It's the thing that's, you know, he's a good guy, I can change him.
Yeah.
He's just a rough diamond, he's just a rogue. No, he isn't. He's a fucking liar, and he's dangerous, and he could kill somebody. And that somebody could have been you know. And then when you start to relive all that sort of stuff, you know, the arrest, the whole thing, you strip your life back right up until the present moment, how you're functioning on this wing, why you're here.
Wow.
What's next? What's the next thing? You start to think critically, the fuck, who can see me? Everybody knows that, you know, what I am now. That's when that thing, that part of you is like, how do I rebuild myself from this? You know?
Tam, that's incredibly powerful. And what a journey to have gone through in there, to unravel cemented beliefs and to unravel a persona that you had and all the rest of it, to reduce you down to nothing and to accept that change happening as well, you know, going through all of those emotions, reliving things from your childhood and understanding how that may have affected you. I mean, you know, most people go their entire lives without diving sort of deep into their past through therapy and stuff like that. And it's something that you've done, and it's painful. You know, anyone that's done therapy, including myself, knows how that can be. But I think it's incredibly admirable, and I really respect you sharing it with us in so much detail. Tam, so then you were released in sort of 2002, I think.
Yeah.
Is that right?
July 2002.
July 2002. Now, after you were released, you got yourself a photography qualification, which was fantastic.
No, it was during, actually. During prison.
Right.
I applied, while I was in Grendon, I applied to go to London College of Printing.
Oh, right.
And I was thinking that, where am I going to go? You know, won't go back to Scotland, can't go back to Norfolk. What am I going to do? And a good friend of mine who'd supported me throughout the whole of my sentence had been on a course at LCP, the London College of Printing, to do professional photography. And he said, Tam, that was always a passion of yours, you know. And he had already completed that. And he says, I'll put a word in for you. And I'm saying, get me the details. He sent me the details. I made the application from prison, and I was released for a day to go for an interview, which I was then accepted for. But I still had years to go. I still had years to go. And they're like, but when can you come? And I said, well, when I move to an open prison in London, I'm applying for a resettlement unit in Richmond. And they said, right, okay, so how are you going to put yourself through a year or 2 years of college? It's expensive. And I sat in the library and I went through every single charity, every single support network and organization that was available for somebody in my position. And I got nothing but support. I got nothing but support.
That's fantastic.
I mean, I got over £9,000 a year to put me through college, to get all my equipment, my transport to prison and to college.
Wow.
And then slightly beyond my release, you know, so I was being released on a daily basis to go to college. I learned professional photography. And then I went on the photojournalist course. I learned all that. And then when I was released, 2002, I became a gardener.
Yeah.
For a short time.
Yeah. Well, you have to do something to tie you over, right? Yeah. While the photography's on the way. But Tam, the final thing that I wanted to ask you about sort of before coming towards the end of the interview was what you decided to do with that photography. And that was, of course, go back to the Middle East and get back to taking photos and all the rest of it. But the thing that I really wanted to focus on is how you ended up in the amazing project, which was building that playground in Halabja, in that region, which helped to bring different communities together. And you actually won an award for building that playground in what was effectively a war zone, which was incredible. And I know a few years had passed since you left prison, but if you could talk to us about that project and about some of the work that you did there, because obviously it's incredible.
So when I was released from prison, obviously I had to tide myself over. You have to get real money, and not all photographers go straight into making money. So I became a gardener, and that really did help me to settle. Because I realized that coming out with these high expectations of going into this super smooth world was actually a load of bollocks. And my therapist, Joe Marr, had said, look, why are you going into this world of seduction, Tam, of image and seduction and presentation, mate? It's not you, And you see, you've chased this for a long time. Good luck with it, but you need to really think about what you're doing. And it's exactly what I've done, So for about 2 years, I just worked. I was doing my photography, as a hobby, and then I went off. I knew that I was going back to the Middle East. The war was building up. The invasion of Iraq had taken place. I'd never been out of touch with Middle Eastern issues and politics and stories, and I had a huge pull, and I knew that I was just going to get on a plane and then a bus and then walk across that border, and that's exactly what I'd done in 2005. But I joined as a volunteer the Kurdish Human Rights Project in London, and I offered my services as their photographer in that region. And they went, go off and bring back and see what we'll see. So off I went, and I spent a summer going to Southeast Turkey and then over into Iraq and just wandering and photographing. And then my first images that I brought back were used in their annual reports, which for me was the sort of circle closing for itself. I'd actually now been published in a human rights magazine where people were fighting for people's rights just to be recognized, as a nation, as a nationality, as a people, and that then began a 10-year relationship with the Kurdish Human Rights, where I was working for them. And in 2008, I went to Halabja to photograph the 20th anniversary or commemoration of the massacre there, which has now been classed as a genocide. During that time, I was photo documenting a week running up to the commemoration and a week after. And I met lots of people who wanted to kind of build a playground for the kids. They'd seen on the internet and what they'd seen was an adventure playground, zip lines and massive swings, and lots of fire. And it just really inspired me. But I said, no, there's no way that I'm getting involved in anything out here that would take me away from my photography. But then selfishly, I did say, but maybe I can ingratiate myself with this community, because it's quite a tough community. It's where the Ansar Islam, Junda Islam, had based themselves around that region. And they were the excuse that Tony Blair and George Bush used for going to war in Iraq, that these Al-Qaeda terrorists were based in here. And in fact, the last battle was fought in Halabja. But I found myself within 3 or 4 days of coming home, meeting an incredible carpenter, Lizzie Fleming, who was building adventure playgrounds. And instantly, we just hit it off, and she introduced me to her boss, who'd been doing it for 45 years at that time. Instantly, we didn't hit it off. He questioned me, and drag me over the coals about why I wanted to work with children in a conflict zone and what that would mean. And, so I became a servant to him for a year in his company. So I had to volunteer for a year to prove myself that I could actually build an adventure playground. Meanwhile, he helped to organize and initiate a charity called the Halabja Community Playground Play Project. And then from that, we established what we'd need, how we would go about building up a trust between a community that was coming out of conflict, that had seen lots of betrayal, that Westerners were going to go back into and do some sort of fly-by-night project. This guy, Jess Millen, was like, ain't having it. You're not parachuting in to do something. This is going to take you years of your life. You really need to think, because it's going to be a minimum of 5 years, Tam, maybe longer.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? Fuck that. I might not want to do that, but I was so intrigued by the project. And then suddenly I had something to do, that wasn't just involving a camera. It was involved in meeting a community, understanding what happened to them. Possibly projects would spring out of that, which they did. We spent 10 years there.
Wow.
Doing loads of different projects with the library, the schools, the Genocide Memorial. I was working with them, doing interpretation for them and applying for visas for people that wanted to visit the Genocide Memorial and also for their team to go elsewhere in the world. And I feel like it's another home for me.
Yeah.
But and then it introduced me to the play world in London, where I finally met my partner. And we've got 2 children, and we run the Haringey Play Association in Tottenham, and it's just incredible. It really is incredible. And my life, I'm nearly 60.
Yeah.
My life, I'm looking at it from this point of view. I'm seeing so many young men who were on the same track as me, and I'm seeing them growing up from 5-year-old to 15 now, and trying to get them to think critically about their next step and what their plan is going to be for the next 4 years is crucial for me. So we run a mentoring project here. We support families, young people who are really suffering from what they call social anxiety now, and or being pulled into some of the local crime in the area.
Tam, you've done so many fantastic things since leaving prison. How many people can say that they've built a playground in a war zone which brought different communities together, and working with the libraries, working with the schools over there, all the rest of it, and then coming back and continuing working in that industry here, and all the stuff you just talked about, the mentorship and wanting to make a difference, which I really see in you. You showed me around earlier about the positive impact that some of these sort of play centres can have on communities, and you're so passionate about it. And even throughout your life before you went to prison, you were still trying to do some positive things. You worked in the youth project before. You were obviously traveling to the Middle East doing the photography. There's always been a desire in you to do that, to have that impact in society. It just took you a while to unravel some of the sort of beliefs and stuff that you had from a kid, but it's I've certainly loved coming here today and seeing your working environment, and you certainly strike me as one of the sort of warmest and friendliest people that I've had the pleasure of doing a podcast interview with, genuinely. So it's been an absolute pleasure, Tam, and it makes me very happy to see how far you've come, really, compared to all of those years ago. I think it's night and day, really. You've had to tackle some really difficult things in this interview, which you've done fantastically well. So it's been a pleasure and a privilege. And Tam, just before we finish off, the way I like to finish off all of the podcast episodes is just by asking guests if they've got any, sort of parting bits of advice, things that, whether they are sort of thought processes or just general bits of advice, whatever, that have helped you throughout your darkest moments that listeners might be able to apply to their own lives. So is there anything that you'd sort of leave as a parting note, Tam?
Yeah, I would say, Sam, never give up hope. You might not be ready for change. You might think the way that I did, that you're some sort of roadman, some sort of robber, that your reputation and your identity is wrapped up in maybe violence that you're involved with, or some sort of criminal sin that might lead you into prison or worse. But there's always somewhere along your journey that you can turn off, that you can change, that you can change at any moment. As soon as you feel, I really need to bring to change my life, there's people around you that you can reach out to.
Yeah.
And if you're not ready right at that point, then it might be a year, might be 2, might be 5, maybe 10 years up the line. But there's always a point where you can change. And I'd hang on to that. I don't preach to people.
Yeah.
I just think, are you ready or not?
Yeah.
And today's a huge opportunity.
Yeah.
Because and I learned this in the mountains in Iraq. People who used to tell me, all we have is today and tomorrow.
Yeah.
That's all we got, mate.
Yeah.
You've got today and you've got tomorrow. And how you act today can affect that. Because it might place you somewhere tomorrow that you might never want to be, So, yeah. Never give up hope.
Yeah. You are living, breathing evidence, Tam, that you should never give up hope. And, you changed late on in your life and you've done fantastic things ever since. So you are living, breathing evidence of that. Tam, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We've set the record for the longest podcast in all of the 30 episodes that I've done, but there's so many things in here. I'm sure listeners are going to find it extremely useful. There are so many different aspects of it. It's been an emotional one as well. And I can't thank you enough for giving up this much time and sharing your story so openly. It's been it really has been a privilege.
Sam, thanks for inviting me. And I'm sorry it's taken this long as well.
No.
In the pandemic.
Yeah, no worries at all. No worries at all. Cheers, Tam. That's it for today's episode, guys. I hope you enjoyed it or found it useful. If you did, make sure you hit like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out, and also that way it makes sure that you never miss an episode. If you've got a story you want to share on the Back on Track podcast, get in touch, give me a shout. I'd love to hear from you via backontrackpod@gmail.com.